The word rips through the Ashford dining room like a gunshot. Poison. My 3-year-old son Marcus points at the crystal decanter on the table, his face scrunched in that particular expression of toddler certainty that usually means he's identified a dog or a truck. Except this time he's pointing at Mrs. Victoria Ashford's evening water. The silence that follows is absolute. Victoria, pale, trembling, 51 years old, and weighing maybe 90 pounds after 18 months of mysterious illness, stares at the decanter. Then at Marcus. Then at me. Her husband, Richard Ashford, CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals, sets down his fork with controlled precision. "Excuse me. I'm so sorry," I say, scooping Marcus up. He's been learning words from his picture books. He doesn't know what he's saying. "Poison," Marcus repeats, struggling in my arms, still pointing. Like the book. The bad bottle. My blood turns to ice. Because 3 days ago, I read Marcus a library book about staying safe. About not touching cleaning supplies. About bottles with skull symbols that mean danger. And yesterday, while I was cleaning Richard's study, I saw a bottle in his locked cabinet. Just for a moment before he appeared and firmly closed the door. A pharmaceutical bottle. With a symbol. A symbol that looked exactly like the one in Marcus's book. 18 months earlier, the Ashford mansion sits on 5 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, all stone facades and perfectly manicured lawns that whisper old money in a language I'm still learning to understand. I stand at the service entrance with Marcus on my hip, my interview suit pressed within an inch of its life, my single mother desperation carefully hidden behind a professional smile. The head of staff, Mrs. Pemberton, looks at Marcus with barely concealed disapproval. "We weren't informed you had a child." "The agency knows," I say evenly. "I'm a single parent." Marcus is well behaved. He won't interfere with my work. This is partially true. Marcus is 3. He's a hurricane of curiosity and noise and sticky fingers. But he's all I have, and I need this job. Mrs. Pemberton sighs. Mrs. Ashford specifically requested live-in staff. She requires round-the-clock care now. I understand. She leads me through hallways lined with artwork worth more than I'll earn in a decade. Past rooms that echo with expensive emptiness. To a bedroom where Victoria Ashford sits in a wheelchair by the window. She looks like a ghost of wealth. Designer clothes hanging on a skeletal frame. Perfectly styled hair framing a face carved hollow by suffering. Hands that shake when she lifts them. "Mrs. Ashford," Mrs. Pemberton announces. "This is Janelle Morrison." For the care position. Victoria's eyes focus on me with desperate intensity. Then drop to Marcus. Something in her face softens. "Hello," she whispers. "What's your name?" Marcus hides his face in my shoulder. Then peeks out. "Marcus. That's a strong name. A ghost of a smile. Do you like stories, Marcus?" He nods vigorously. "Then perhaps you'll read to me sometimes." I get very lonely. My throat tightens. There's something in her voice. A loneliness that goes deeper than solitude. The kind that comes from being surrounded by people who've stopped seeing you as human. "I'd be honored to care for you, Mrs. Ashford." I say. "Victoria." She reaches out a trembling hand. "If you're going to watch me fade away, at least call me Victoria." The first month, I learned the routine. Victoria's illness has no name. No diagnosis despite dozens of specialists. She experiences progressive weakness, cognitive decline, severe gastrointestinal distress. She's been to Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, every specialist money can buy. No one can figure out what's killing her. Richard Ashford is attentive to the point of obsession. He personally oversees every aspect of her care, reviews her medications, prepares her supplements, tests her food and water for allergens. "I won't lose her," he tells me on day 3, his hand on Victoria's shoulder. "Whatever this is, we'll beat it." He sounds sincere, looks sincere. The devoted husband fighting an invisible enemy. But Victoria flinches when he touches her. Just slightly, just enough that I notice. I'm good at noticing things. You have to be when you're a single mother working 3 jobs before this one. When you've learned that survival means paying attention to what people don't say. Victoria is worse after the meals Richard personally prepares. The special mineral water he has delivered. The supplements he administers himself. She's worse when he's home. Better, slightly, barely, when he travels for business. I start keeping notes. Private ones. Dated observations in a journal I hide in Marcus's diaper bag. Day 12. Victoria ate breakfast prepared by cook. Managed full portion. Seemed alert. Day 13. Richard home. Prepared her lunch himself. Victoria violently ill by evening. Day 14. Richard insisted on administering evening supplements personally. Victoria disoriented, couldn't remember my name. Marcus notices too, in his toddler way. Mr. Richard scary, he whispers one night. Why scary? Makes Miss Victoria sad. Out of the mouths of babes. On day 37, Richard travels to a pharmaceutical conference in Boston. He'll be gone 3 days. Before he leaves, he gives me detailed instructions. Specific supplements Victoria must take. Specific meal schedules. He's written everything down with medical precision. Follow this exactly, he says. Her condition is delicate. The moment his car leaves the driveway, Victoria asks me to help her to the garden. She hasn't been outside in 2 months. We sit among the roses, Marcus playing nearby with toy trucks. Victoria lifts her face to the sun. I feel clearer today, she says. Like fog lifting. You look better. Do I? She studies her hands. Sometimes I think I'm losing my mind. The doctors say it's neurological. But Janelle, sometimes I think. She trails off. Think what? Nothing. Paranoid thoughts. The illness talking. But her eyes say something different. Over the next 3 days, I don't follow Richard's instructions exactly. I give Victoria the prescribed medications, those I can verify with her official doctors. But the special supplements, the mineral water, the protein powder Richard insists on, I reduce them, dilute them, replace some with regular vitamins from the pharmacy. Victoria improves. Not dramatically, but she's more alert, less confused. She keeps down food. She laughs at Marcus's antics. She looks alive. Richard returns on day 40. Within 6 hours of his first personally prepared meal, Victoria is back in bed, barely conscious. That's when I know. I don't know what. I don't know how. I don't have proof. But I know. I start researching. Late at night, while Marcus sleeps, I search for patterns. Poisoning that mimics illness. Substances that cause progressive symptoms. Ways a pharmaceutical CEO might have access to things that wouldn't show up on standard tests. I find cases. Slow poisoning. Antifreeze. Arsenic. Thallium. Husbands killing wives so gradually, it looks like disease. My hands shake as I read. Because I've been here before. Not exactly here, but close enough. Marcus's father didn't poison me. He just crushed me slowly with control. With isolation. With making me doubt my own perceptions until leaving felt impossible. Until one day I grabbed Marcus and ran anyway. I learned then that your instincts matter more than someone else's authority. That the truth doesn't care about credentials or confidence. That sometimes the scariest thing you can do is trust yourself. On day 53, I buy Marcus a children's book about safety. Bright pictures. Simple words. Bottles with skull and crossbones, symbols that mean danger. We read it together every night. Poison bad, Marcus announces, absorbed in the pictures. Very bad, I agree. Never touch bottles with that symbol. I'm teaching him safety. But I'm also teaching him to recognize something. Just in case. Day 62. I'm cleaning Richard's study while he's in a meeting. The locked cabinet is slightly ajar. Just an inch. I shouldn't look. It's none of my business. I'm just the maid. But Victoria's face haunts me. The way she flinches. The way she improves when he's gone. I look. Inside, pharmaceutical samples. Medical supplies. And one bottle, pushed to the back, with a label partially torn off. But the symbol is visible. Scotland. Crossbones. The same symbol from Marcus's book. Find what you're looking for. Richard's voice behind me nearly stops my heart. I turn, clutching my cleaning supplies. Sorry, Mr. Ashford. The cabinet was open. I was just closing it. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. How helpful. He locks the cabinet. Pockets the key. Janelle, I want to be clear about boundaries. My study is private. Some things in here are confidential. Pharmaceutical samples. Proprietary research. You understand. Of course. Good. Still smiling. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. It's not a threat. Not exactly. But I hear it anyway. That night, I hold Marcus extra tight. We might need to leave soon. I whisper. Why? Because sometimes staying quiet is dangerous. He doesn't understand. He's 3. But he will. Which brings us to tonight. To Marcus pointing at Victoria's water decanter. To the word that changes everything. Poison. Richard Ashford's face hardens into something that makes my stomach drop. Janelle, remove your son from the dining room. Now. But Victoria hasn't moved. She's staring at the decanter like she's seeing it for the first time. Marcus, she says softly. Why do you say poison? The bottle in Daddy's office, Marcus says. Same picture as my book. Every word out of his mouth is a grenade. Richard stands abruptly. This is absurd. He's a child with an overactive imagination. Janelle, I told you to what bottle? Victoria's voice cuts through his. Stronger than I've heard it in weeks. The silence stretches like a wire about to snap. I make my choice. There's a bottle in Mr. Ashford's study. I say. Pharmaceutical sample. With a hazard symbol. I saw it while cleaning. You were snooping, Richard says coldly. The cabinet was unlocked. You're fired. Pack your things. Richard. Victoria's hands grip her wheelchair arms. What bottle? Research samples, darling. Nothing that concerns you. This woman has violated our privacy, made wild accusations through a toddler. Show me. You're not well enough to. Show me the bottle. The force of it shocks the room into stillness. Richard's mask slips for just a moment. I see something underneath. Calculation, rage, and fear. Fine, he says. If it will settle this ridiculous situation. He leaves. Returns with a pharmaceutical bottle. The label is intact now. Printed, professional, legitimate looking. Thallium sulfate, he reads. Industrial pesticide sample. Kept locked for safety. Completely unrelated to Victoria's care. Victoria stares at it. Why do you have that? Research purposes. We're developing new safety protocols at the company. It sounds plausible. Reasonable. Exactly what a pharmaceutical CEO would say. But Marcus tugs my sleeve. Whispers loud enough for everyone to hear. That's the poison bottle. Richard's jaw tightens. He's 3. He can't possibly. He has photographic memory. I interrupt. His pediatrician tested him. He remembers images perfectly. This is true. Marcus's preschool teacher noticed it first. How he could recall picture books page by page. How patterns stick in his mind like photographs. That's the bottle from your cabinet. I continue. But the label's different now. Before, it was partially torn. The lot number was visible. Now it's pristine. Richard's eyes go dead. You're making things up to avoid being fired. Then let's test the water, Victoria says. Everyone turns to her. She's sitting straighter than I've seen in months. Her hand steady. Her voice clear. Test my mineral water. The supplements Richard prepares. My evening tea. Test everything. Victoria, you're being paranoid. Test it, or I call the police right now. The ultimatum hangs in the air. Richard spreads his hands. The picture of patient reason. Of course. Test anything you want. You'll see this is hysteria prompted by an unstable employee. But his eyes promise consequences. Victoria calls her personal physician. Dr. Sarah Chin arrives within the hour. An old friend, someone Victoria trusts, someone Richard hasn't screened. I need you to test everything Richard has been giving me, Victoria says, and run a full toxicology panel on my blood. Dr. Chin looks at Richard, at me, at the tension crackling through the room. All right, she says carefully. She collects samples. The mineral water, the supplements, the protein powder. Draws Victoria's blood with practiced efficiency. Results will take a few days, she says. Victoria, I'm going to recommend you stay somewhere else while we wait. She's not well enough to be moved, Richard protests. I'm well enough to decide for myself, Victoria says. Janelle, pack my things. We're going to Dr. Chen's guest house. You're taking medical advice from the maid now? Richard's voice drips contempt. I'm taking advice from my instincts, which I should have trusted months ago. Something in her tone makes Richard pause. Makes me realize this isn't the first time Victoria has suspected. She suspected before, and been talked out of it. Gaslit. Convinced her paranoia was symptom of illness. Until a 3-year-old said the word she was afraid to speak. We pack quickly. Marcus helps by putting his toy trucks in Victoria's suitcase. She laughs, actually laughs, and tells him they're perfect. Richard watches from the doorway. Silent now. Calculating. This is a mistake, he finally says. When the tests come back clean, we'll need to discuss your mental state, Victoria. And if they don't come back clean, they will. But his confidence sounds hollow. It's seriously 2 detectives, a forensics team. They collect the samples. Take Victoria's statement. Mine. They photograph Marcus's safety book with its skull and crossbones symbols. This is highly unusual, Detective Rodriguez admits. A toddler identifying poison. He has exceptional visual memory. I explain. And he's honest in the way only 3-year-olds are. He saw the symbol, recognized it from his book, and said what he thought. Kids don't lie about things like this, her partner adds. They don't have the context to manipulate. They go to arrest Richard Ashford. He's gone. The mansion is empty. His car missing. His phone off. He ran, Victoria says when they tell us. She sounds unsurprised. He knew. The moment Marcus said that word, he knew it was over. They issue a warrant. Put out alerts. Start tracking his movements. He's found 36 hours later trying to board a private plane to Switzerland. The arraignment is surreal. Richard Ashford in handcuffs. Richard Ashford pleading not guilty. Richard Ashford's lawyers already spinning narratives about misunderstandings and contaminated samples and vengeful whys. But the evidence is overwhelming. Thallium in Victoria's water, supplements, tea. Thallium in her body. Hair analysis showing months of exposure. Financial records showing his desperation. Computer searches about undetectable poisons and slow-acting toxins. And Marcus's testimony, recorded gently by a child psychologist, showing him identify the bottle, explain why he called it poison. Out of the mouths of babes, the prosecutor says. The trial is set for 6 months out. The trial lasts 3 weeks. Richard's defense team is everything we expected. Expensive, aggressive, dismissive. They paint Victoria as mentally unstable. Me as an opportunistic employee seeking revenge for being fired. Marcus as a confused child who learned a word and misapplied it. But the evidence doesn't care about their narratives. Dr. Chen testifies about the thallium levels, the systematic poisoning, the calculated doses designed to sicken without immediately killing. A toxicologist explains how thallium sulfate causes the exact symptoms Victoria experienced: weakness, cognitive decline, gastrointestinal distress. All the mysterious ailments that baffled doctors. Because those doctors were looking for disease, not murder. A forensic accountant presents Richard's financial situation. Ashford Pharmaceuticals on the verge of bankruptcy, mounting debts, a lifestyle sustained by Victoria's family money. Money he'd lose in divorce but inherit upon her death. Motive, means, opportunity, all laid out like a blueprint. Then it's my turn. I describe the patterns I noticed. Victoria's improvement when Richard traveled. Her decline when he administered supplements personally. The locked cabinet. The bottle with the torn label. Why didn't you report your suspicions sooner? The defense attorney asks, trying to make me look negligent. Because I'm a maid? I say simply. Who would believe me over a pharmaceutical CEO? I needed proof. I needed to be certain. Because accusations like this can destroy lives if you're wrong. And you were willing to let Mrs. Ashford continue suffering while you gathered proof? I diluted the supplements when Mr. Ashford traveled, I admit. I reduced the dosages I couldn't verify. I protected her how I could while documenting what I saw. You tampered with medical treatments? I tampered with poison. The courtroom murmurs. Then comes Marcus. The judge allows his recorded testimony, him identifying the bottle, explaining about his picture book, demonstrating his visual memory by recalling other images perfectly. Poison, his 3-year-old voice says on the recording. The bad bottle. The jury watches, riveted. Richard's lawyer tries to dismiss it. Children misidentify things constantly. This proves nothing. But the prosecutor shows Marcus's picture book, shows the symbol, shows the pharmaceutical bottle, asks the toxicologist. Is thallium sulfate marked with this hazard symbol? Yes. It's required for toxic substances. And would a child who'd memorized this symbol from a safety book recognize it on a real bottle? If the child had the visual memory skills described, absolutely. The defense crumbles slowly, then all at once. Richard's lawyers try to suggest the thallium contamination was accidental, that the samples were tainted, that Victoria somehow poisoned herself. But they can't explain Richard's internet searches, his financial motive, the systematic nature of the dosing, the fact that Victoria improved the moment she stopped consuming what he provided. They can't explain away the truth that a 3-year-old saw and named. The jury deliberates for 8 hours. Guilty. Attempted murder. Assault. Fraud. Richard Ashford is sentenced to 30 years. I'm in the courtroom when they read the verdict. Victoria sits beside me, Marcus on her lap. When the word guilty echoes through the room, she doesn't cry or celebrate. She just breathes, like she's been holding her breath for 2 years and can finally let it out. Victoria's recovery takes months. The thallium poisoning left damage, nerve issues, some permanent cognitive effects. But she's alive. She's strong. She's rebuilding. She sells the mansion. I can't live in the place where he tried to kill me, she says. Too many ghosts. She buys a smaller house, still beautiful, but warm. Human-scaled. She fills it with light and laughter and a garden that Marcus helps her plant. She starts a foundation, the Victoria Ashford Trust for Domestic Abuse Survivors. Because poisoning isn't always chemical, she explains. Sometimes it's emotional, psychological, making you doubt your own perceptions until you can't trust yourself. The foundation provides resources for people leaving abusive relationships, legal support, financial assistance, housing, counseling. I had money and still almost didn't make it, Victoria says. Imagine what it's like without resources. I don't have to imagine. I've lived it. She asked me to run the foundation's intake program. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You trusted your instincts when everyone said not to. You protected someone you barely knew. That's not something you learn in graduate school, Janelle. So I do it. I interview survivors. I help them document abuse. I connect them with lawyers and therapists and safe housing. I teach them what I learned, that your observations matter, that your fear is data, that the voice saying something's wrong deserves to be heard. We helped 43 families in our first year. We're just getting started. Marcus turns 4, then 5. He doesn't remember much about that night at the Ashford mansion. Doesn't understand what his words set in motion. I saw the poison bottle, he says simply when I try to explain. Like in my book. You saved someone's life, I tell him. Why? Because you told the truth about what you saw. Oh, he thinks about this. Should I always tell the truth? Yes, I say. Even when it's scary. Even when grown-ups don't want to hear it. He nods seriously, then goes back to his trucks. But I know he'll remember. When it matters, he'll remember. Victoria and I become family in the way people do when they survive something together. We have Sunday dinners. We celebrate holidays. Marcus calls her Aunt Victoria and brings her flowers from the garden, dandelions, mostly, which she displays in crystal vases like roses. Do you ever wish you'd stayed quiet? She asks me one evening, watching Marcus play. Made it someone else's problem? I think about this. About the easy path I didn't take. Every day, I admit. It would have been simpler, safer. But you didn't. No, because staying quiet when you know something's wrong, that's its own kind of poison. It eats at you, kills you slowly. Victoria reaches across the table, takes my hand. Thank you, she says, for being brave enough to say something, to risk everything for someone you barely knew. You would have done the same. I don't know if I would have. I didn't even do it for myself. You did though, I remind her. You demanded the tests. You left. You believed Marcus when he said what he saw. After you made it possible to believe. We sit in comfortable silence. Two women who learned that survival isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and speaking anyway. 2 years after the trial, I'm invited to speak at a conference on domestic abuse awareness. I almost say no. I'm not a speaker. I'm not an expert. I'm just someone who noticed things. But Victoria convinces me. That's exactly why you should speak. So I stand on a stage in front of 300 people and tell them about the Ashfords. About the patterns I saw. About the voice that said something was wrong even when I couldn't prove it. About Marcus saying one word that changed everything. I'm not a hero, I tell them. I'm a single mother who needed a job, who stumbled into a situation I didn't fully understand, who was terrified of being wrong. But I'd been wrong before. Wrong about Marcus's father. Wrong to stay so long. Wrong to doubt my own instincts. So when I saw Victoria's suffering, when I noticed the patterns, I decided that being wrong about Richard Ashford was less dangerous than being silent. That's the calculation we all make, isn't it? Stay quiet and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything. I'm here to tell you, speak up. Even if you're wrong. Even if no one believes you. Even if it costs you everything. Because silence has a cost too. And it's always higher than you think. The audience applauds. Afterward, people line up to talk to me. To share their stories. To say they've noticed things too, suspected things, stayed quiet because who would believe them? Believe yourself, I tell them. That's enough to start. Marcus starts kindergarten. His teacher calls me in for a conference. I brace myself. He's been struggling with transitions, with sitting still, with the social complexities of 5-year-olds. Mrs. Morrison, she says, I wanted to talk about Marcus's observational skills. Here it comes. He's too focused on details. Too literal. Too something. He noticed that another student was being sent to the nurse's office repeatedly. She continues. Always on days when the father picked him up. Marcus told me the boy seemed scared of his dad. My stomach drops. I looked into it. Spoke with the school counselor. We discovered there was a situation at home. The boy is safe now. In temporary foster care while CPS investigates. She looks at me with something like wonder. Your son saw what trained teachers missed. He paid attention to patterns. And he spoke up. I think of Victoria. Of the word Marcus said at dinner. Of how truth can come from the smallest voices. He learned it from someone brave, I say. 5 years after that night at the Ashford mansion, Victoria and I stand in the foundation office, looking at photographs on the wall. 43 families helped. Then 87. Then 122. Each photo represents someone who got out. Who found safety. Who learned to trust their instincts again. We're changing lives, Victoria says. You're changing lives, I correct. This is your foundation. Your money. Your vision. It's our foundation. Your vision too. She looks at me seriously. You know what I see when I look at these photos? What? I see what happens when people believe each other. When the powerful listen to the powerless. When a maid and a toddler are taken seriously despite every reason to dismiss them. Marcus isn't a toddler anymore, I point out. He's 8. But he was 3 when he saved my life. We stand together in silence, honoring that truth. If this story touched you, I want you to know something important. You don't need credentials to notice patterns. You don't need authority to trust your instincts. You don't need permission to protect someone in danger. You just need courage. The courage to say, something's wrong. The courage to ask questions when silence feels safer. The courage to believe yourself when everyone else doubts you. Victoria Ashford almost died because people assumed her wealthy, respected, medically trained husband knew best. Because those of us who suspected didn't think we had the right to speak up. Until a 3-year-old pointed at a bottle and said the truth without fear. Children do that. They see things and name them honestly. They haven't learned yet that some truths are inconvenient. That some observations make powerful people uncomfortable. We need to be more like that. We need to look at the world through honest eyes and say what we see, even when, especially when, it challenges people everyone trusts. The maids of the world, the overlooked ones, the underestimated ones. We see things others miss. We notice patterns. We connect dots that privilege blinds people to. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to speak, we save lives. Not because we're heroes, but because we decided someone else's life mattered more than our comfort. Marcus still has that picture book about safety. The one with poison bottles and hazard symbols. He keeps it on his shelf between stories about dragons and dinosaurs. That's the book that helped Aunt Victoria, he tells his friends. And in a way it is. But really, what helped Victoria was a child who'd been taught to recognize danger and an adult who'd learned to trust what she saw. That combination changed everything. It can change things for you too. So look, notice, trust yourself. And when you see the poison, whatever form it takes, say its name. Even if you're afraid. Even if no one wants to hear it. Even if you're just the maid. Say it anyway. Someone's life might depend on your courage. And that's a responsibility none of us can afford to ignore.